All right, so are you ready to really explore the minds of those creative geniuses and maybe even, unlock a little bit of your own creative potential? We're going to be diving into an episode of the Mad Genius Thesis, and it grapples with that age-old question. The one, is there a connection between creativity and mental illness? And they're using this book, Dionysus in Literature, Essays on Literary Madness, edited by Branimir M. Reiger, as a kind of like a springboard for the conversation.
Yeah, it's a question that's just as fascinating as it is, well, complex,
Yeah.
And this book, with all those essays examining literary madness, really does provide a unique lens for exploring that connection.
Yeah, I agree. So before we even jump into the specific examples,
Yeah.
Reiger, in the intro, he brings up something that really kind of struck me, the challenge of defining madness itself. He argues it's not a simple, black and white issue. So what do you make of that?
It's a point that, resonates throughout the whole book. Even the terminology, like the words that we use to even discuss madness, is constantly changing. Reiger points to how the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the psychiatrist's Bible for diagnoses, has expanded dramatically its list of mental disorders over the years.
Oh, wow. So it makes you wonder if what we consider madness is like a moving target, always shifting with, cultural norms and understandings.
Yeah.
So it makes me think about those thinkers, the ones that challenge the traditional view of mental illness, people like R.D. Laing and Thomas Saz. They argued that the label of mental illness is often like a tool for social control, a way to categorize those who just don't conform.
Oh, absolutely. And that really leads to a crucial question. Is madness a true illness, or is it a social construct? Used to label and control those who just, deviate from what we consider to be the norm. What do you think?
That's something I'm still wrestling with. That's a question I think every listener should ponder. But let's get back to the book. Reiger outlines three ways that madness is used in the literature. The first one, the writer's madness, is analyzing the author's life, looking for signs of mental illness, and then connecting it to their work.
But this approach can be kind of tricky, though, can't it? I mean, does understanding an author's personal struggles, does that really unlock the meaning of their work? Or are we just projecting, our own assumptions onto their art?
I see your point.
Yeah.
It does feel a bit, reductive to just slap a label on an author and call it a day, which is probably why the book also looks at mad characters, those who exhibit abnormal behavior within their fictional worlds. That's that second category.
Yeah, you got it. Think of Shakespeare's Hamlet, a character whose sanity is constantly, debated. Examining these characters allows us to explore the complexities of madness without, getting bogged down in the author's biography.
So we're looking at the madness as expressed within the story itself. And the third category, using psychological terms to analyze literature, which seems like a more an academic approach.
Yes, this category, what the book refers to as the critical method, is about applying, psychological theories and concepts to understand, the characters and their motivations. It's like using psychology as a lens to decode the deeper meaning of the text.
And Reiger argues that all three of these approaches are intertwined.
Right, exactly. They each offer a different angle for understanding madness in literature, and ultimately, by exploring all of them, we gain a broader understanding of human behavior itself. We see how creativity and mental states and societal pressures, they intersect and they influence one another.
Okay, so let's dive into one of the essays that directly tackles this connection between creativity and madness. I'm talking about Are Creative Writers Mad by Albert Rothenberg.
Oh, yeah. Rothenberg doesn't shy away from the debate. He presents, a whole spectrum of opinions, from psychoanalysts who see a strong link between creativity and mental illness to those who really downplay it. He even brings in, empirical studies suggesting a more nuanced relationship.
Yeah, so he really does present this fascinating array of perspectives, drawing on the psychoanalysts, literary critics, historians, empirical studies. He really paints a full picture of the debate.
Yeah.
What really stood out to me was how he juxtaposes those contrasting viewpoints.
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me was his inclusion of literary critics and historians. They offer differing opinions on the prevalence of madness in writers. It shows how the perception of this connection has evolved over time.
Right. And then there's this one question that Rothenberg poses that I haven't been able to shake, is the public's fascination with the mad writer fueled by envy Like, are
Yeah.
we as a society uncomfortable with the idea of, genius existing alongside mental instability? So we try to, explain it away as madness.
Yeah, it's a really thought-provoking idea, isn't it? It forces us to examine our own biases and assumptions about creativity.
Now, I want to shift gears a bit and look at an essay that tackles a specific author, William Blake. Vision, Madness, Myth, and William Blake by Paul Youngquist really digs into Blake's, life and work.
Oh yeah, Blake, he was often rumored to be mad during his lifetime, and Youngquist's essay, it unpacks how his visionary eccentricities were initially seen as evidence of insanity.
It seems like later critics, they tried to reframe Blake as a mystic or a genius to kind of salvage his reputation. But Youngquist argues that Blake's own poetry actually like grapples with the theme of madness in these compelling ways, suggesting a deeper understanding of the topic.
Yeah, I found it particularly interesting how Youngquist points out that Blake's poetry directly addresses the cultural and psychological challenges posed by madness. His work, it isn't, a product of insanity like some might claim. It's a deliberate attempt to understand and grapple with the complexities of the human mind.
Okay, so we've talked about the general link between creativity and mental illness.
Mm.
We've looked at the challenges of defining madness, and we've even delved into a specific author's alleged madness. Where should we head next in our exploration?
Well, let's look at an author who frequently explores the dark side of the human psyche and who himself has spoken about his struggles with addiction and mental health, Stephen King.
Perfect. Carol A. Semp's essay, Stephen King's Misery, Manic Depression and Creativity. In this book, it analyzes his chilling novel Misery through the lens of manic depression, specifically focusing on the character of Annie Wilkes.
Oh, Misery. Yeah, it provides a really interesting case study because it directly confronts the mad geniuses trope. Annie Wilkes, King's infamous #1 fan, she embodies like a kind of obsessive creativity that quickly spirals into violence and control.
And Semph doesn't just, label Annie as mad. She meticulously connects, you know, specific details from the novel to the symptoms of manic depression. For example, she points to Annie's extreme mood swings, her, periods of euphoria and rage, and her tendency towards, violence as evidence of this disorder.
What I find most fascinating is how Sent connects the cyclical nature of manic depression to the creative process itself. She argues that he uses this parallel to create tension and explore the, darker side of artistic inspiration.
And it makes you wonder if there's a fine line between like creative passion and destructive obsession.
Right. And King, through his portrayal of Annie, he doesn't shy away from showing the debilitating aspects of mental illness. He doesn't romanticize it. He shows the raw, often terrifying reality of it. I think that's something that really resonates with readers.
Absolutely. Now, I want to pause here for a moment and get your take on this. Does this connection between manic depression and the creative process, does that ring true for you? What are your initial thoughts?
It's definitely a powerful idea, this link between, creative passion and mental instability. It makes you think about the price of artistic brilliance, doesn't it? But before we get too caught up in the shadows, I want to highlight another essay that takes a slightly different approach. This one uses Karen Horney's psychological theories to analyze American literature.
Oh, you mean A Hornian Approach to American Literature by James R. Huffman? I was so fascinated by how he connects, characters' anxieties and neuroses to these larger themes in American literature.
Yeah, exactly. Horney's theories, particularly her concept of basic anxiety and its impact on personality development, provide this framework for understanding, the motivations and behaviors of characters in American literature.
Yeah, and he uses some really compelling examples, like Harry and Faye Greener from Nathaniel West's The Day of the Locust. These characters, they're so consumed by their impossible dreams and this desperate search for glory. It's heartbreaking and dare I say, a little too relatable.
Right. And Huffman argues that these characters, they're driven by their neuroses. They reveal this dark undercurrent of anxiety that runs beneath the surface of the American dream. He analyzes Joe Christmas from William Faulkner's Light in August, who grapples with a threatening environment and seeks neurotic solutions.
And then there's Thomas Sutpen and Rosa Coldfield from Faulkner's Absalom, driven by this overwhelming rage and grandiose posturing in response to their wounded egos. It's like they're trapped in this cycle of self-destruction.
And through this Hornian lens, we gain a deeper understanding of the complexities of these characters. We see how their actions, while often destructive, are rooted in a deep-seated anxiety and a desperate need to cope with a world that they perceive as hostile.
It makes you wonder if on some level, we're all grappling with similar anxieties. Perhaps madness isn't so much an aberration as it is an amplification of the anxieties we all, experience.
That's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
Now, I want to shift gears a bit and explore another essay that examines how portrayals of madness in war films have evolved alongside our understanding of mental health. Kenneth L. Golden's Through a Lens, Darkly, Madness and the Modern War Film. It traces this evolution from World War II films to the Vietnam War era.
Oh, this was really, really eye-opening. It made me realize how these films, they reflect our changing cultural attitudes towards mental health. Early war films, they often depicted mental breakdowns as war neurosis or combat fatigue triggered by a single traumatic event.
Yeah, exactly. But Golden argues that films like 12 O'Clock High, released in 1949, marked a shift towards recognizing the cumulative effect of stress on soldiers' mental states. It wasn't just about one traumatic incident. It was about this slow, grinding erosion of mental well-being under prolonged duress.
And then with the Vietnam War, films started to really grapple with the psychological toll of that conflict. A war that left so many veterans struggling with what we now call PTSD.
Yeah, and Golden discusses films like Coming Home and Apocalypse Now, which portray the difficulties veterans faced, reintegrating into civilian life, haunted by trauma, disillusionment, and moral ambiguity. These films, they forced audiences to confront the invisible wounds of war and the complexities of trauma.
Yeah, it's a far cry from those simplistic, war neurosis portrayals of earlier films. It shows how our understanding of madness has become more nuanced, recognizing that it's not always a sudden break, but often a slow, insidious process shaped by trauma and experience.
Absolutely. And these films also reflect a growing cultural awareness of the psychological complexities of war and the challenges of coping with trauma.
Okay, I want to jump back to literature for a moment. There's an essay in here that examines how contemporary American novels use institutions, specifically mental institutions as a setting to explore madness, conformity, and rebellion.
You're talking about Barbara Taper-Lupak's Inmates Running the Asylum, the institution in contemporary American fiction. It's fascinating how Lupak, she argues that the institution, it becomes a microcosm of society, a place where the lines between sanity and madness, they blur, and where those who challenge the status quo are often labeled as abnormal.
And she uses Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as like a prime example. Randall McMurphy, the rebellious protagonist, he disrupts the rigid order of the mental ward, and in doing so, he exposes the oppressive nature of the institution itself.
Yeah, and Chief Bromden, the seemingly catatonic narrator, he's actually acutely aware of the power dynamics at play. Lupak points out how Kesey uses the mental institution as a metaphor for any system that seeks to control and silence those who don't, conform.
It's a chilling reminder that the label of madness can be used to marginalize and control those who dare to challenge the norms.
Exactly. And Lupak, she goes on to discuss other novels, such as Walker Percy's Lancelot and Joseph Heller's Catch-22, that use institutions, whether mental institutions or bureaucratic systems, as backdrops for exploring the themes of madness and social control.
It makes you question who gets to define, normal,
No.
and what happens to those who fall outside that definition.
Now, speaking of challenging norms, I want to bring up an essay that dives deep into Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. Thomas C. Fiddick in Madness, Masochism, and Morality. Dostoevsky and his Underground Man dissects the protagonist's complex relationship with madness, masochism, and morality.
The Underground Man. He's such a fascinating character. He's obsessive compulsive. He's paranoid, and he exhibits traits that could be associated with various mental illnesses.
Yeah, it's true. He embodies like a whole spectrum of psychological complexities. But Fiddick, he argues that the underground man's madness is also a form of rebellion against societal expectations. He's a walking critique of the rationalism and utilitarianism that dominated 19th century thought.
Oh, wow. So he's like a living embodiment of the anxieties and frustrations that simmer beneath the surface of societal norms.
Yeah, and Fiddick, he highlights how Dostoevsky he uses the underground man's madness to expose the hypocrisies and limitations of conventional morality and social structures. He challenges us to question our assumptions about what constitutes good and bad, sane and insane.
One thing that really stuck with me was Fiddick's discussion of the underground man's masochism. It's not just about physical pain. It's a psychological state where he seems to find this perverse pleasure in his own suffering.
Exactly. And Fiddick connects this masochism to the underground man's sense of powerlessness in a society he views as oppressive and dehumanizing. It's as if by embracing his suffering, he reclaims a sense of agency.
It's a disturbing yet profound exploration of how madness can be a way of coping with and resisting a world that feels inherently unjust.
It definitely raises questions about how we define sanity in a world that often feels absurd and oppressive.
Speaking of absurdity, I want to touch on another essay that connects Dostoevsky's notes from Underground to Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. David Ketterer in But I Don't Want to Be an Insect, The Metamorphosis of the Self. He draws some thought-provoking parallels between the two works.
Oh yeah, Ketterer argues that both the underground man and Gregor Samsa, who transforms into a giant insect in the Metamorphosis, they both struggle with themes of alienation, identity, and the desire for self-annihilation.
It's like they're both trapped, both physically and psychologically, in a world that doesn't understand or accept them. Yeah. Their transformations, their madness, it represents a rejection of the dehumanizing aspects of modern life.
Yeah. It's interesting how Ketterer connects the underground man's madness to Gregor Samsa's physical transformation. Both characters, they seem to be yearning for a kind of escape, a release from the pain and absurdity of their existence.
And the insect motif in the Metamorphosis, it's particularly striking. It's like Kafka is using this transformation to symbolize the feeling of being crushed and dehumanized by societal pressures.
Right, and both characters in their own ways, they challenge our assumptions about what it means to be human, to be sane, and to find meaning in a world that often feels meaningless.
Okay, let's take a quick detour to Shakespearean territory now. There's an essay in this book that tackles the enduring question of Hamlet's madness. Is he truly mad, or is he just pretending?
Yes. Michael Cohen, in Hamlet: Madness in the Eye of the Reader, argues that the answer to that question lies in part with the reader or viewer. He suggests that different interpretations of Hamlet's character can lead to different conclusions about his mental state.
Oh, so it's not just about what Shakespeare intended, but also about how each individual reader or audience member perceives Hamlet's actions and words.
Mm. Exactly. And Cohen analyzed, key scenes from the play, demonstrating how Hamlet's words and actions, they can be interpreted in multiple ways, supporting both the mad and the sane readings.
He points to Hamlet's famous "to be or not to be" soliloquy as like a prime example of this ambiguity. Is it the raving of a madman, contemplating suicide, or a philosophical reflection on the nature of existence? It's up to each individual to decide.
Yeah, Cohen's essay is a reminder that madness in literature is often a matter of perspective and interpretation. It's not always a clear-cut diagnosis. It's a complex interplay of authorial intent and character portrayal and reader response.
It's like madness becomes a mirror, reflecting our own assumptions and interpretations back at us.
Now building on that idea of madness as a way of challenging conventional thinking, I want to bring up an essay that explores the works of Herman Melville.
Oh, you mean Herman Melville and the Sane Madness of Vital Truth by Elisa von Brentano? That one really got me thinking about how Melville, how he uses madness to expose deeper truths.
Exactly. Von Brentano, she argues that Melville, throughout his career used the concept of madness to challenge conventional notions of truth, sanity, and morality. He focuses on his, iconic novel Moby Dick and Captain Ahab's, relentless pursuit of the white whale.
It's a question that's haunted, readers for centuries. Is Ahab mad, or is his obsession, is it a form of higher truth?
Yeah.
Von Brentano suggests that it's both. His madness, it's both destructive and illuminating.
Yeah, she highlights Ahab's monomania,
Yeah.
his single-minded obsession that ultimately leads to his destruction. But she also points out that Ahab's madness is rooted in a profound awareness of the universe's indifference and the inherent ambiguity of truth.
It's like his madness becomes a way of grappling with the big existential questions that haunt humanity.
Precisely, and Von Brentano argues that Melville uses Ahab's sane madness to critique the limitations of conventional thinking and to explore those truths that lie beyond the surface of appearances. She also connects this idea to other Melville characters like Bartleby the Scrivener, who
Yeah.
passively resists the demands of the world around him.
It's fascinating how Melville uses these characters to challenge our definition of madness. It's not just a pathological state. It's a potential source of insight, a way of seeing the world differently.
And that leads us to the final essay we'll discuss in this deep dive, one that explores the link between madness and creativity in the works of Kurt Vonnegut.
Ah, yes. Images of the Shaman in the Works of Kurt Vonnegut by Lawrence R. Brower. This one really caught my attention because it brings in this concept of the shaman, the individual who mediates between the worlds of the living and the spirit world.
Yeah, and Brower, he argues that Vonnegut's protagonists, they often function as shamanistic figures, navigating the chaotic and absurd landscapes of his fictional worlds.
It's like they're both in and out of the world, straddling that line between sanity and madness.
Yeah, he points to characters like Elliot Rosewater from God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, who embraces a kind of madness as a way of rejecting materialism and connecting with a deeper sense of humanity.
And then there's Billy Pilgrim from Slaughterhouse-Five, unstuck in time, grappling with the trauma of war. Their experiences, though often unsettling, give them unique insights into the human condition.
Exactly, and Brower argues that Vonnegut uses these shamanistic figures to critique the hypocrisies of modern society and to offer this vision of hope and compassion in a world often driven by greed and violence.
So their madness becomes this source of both creative expression and social commentary. Now before we move on, I have to ask, what stands out to you about Vonnegut's use of shamanistic figures?
I think it's fascinating how he uses these figures to explore the idea that madness can be a source of both insight and alienation. His characters often, see the world more clearly than those around them, but their unconventional perspectives, they often lead to them being ostracized or misunderstood.
It's like they're paying a price for their unique vision.
Right. And that tension between seeing clearly and being ostracized is I think at the heart of the Mad Genius's archetype.
It makes you wonder if true creativity requires a certain degree of nonconformity, a willingness to step outside the boundaries of what's considered, normal.
And perhaps that willingness to embrace the unconventional, to see the world differently is both a gift and a burden.
Now shifting gears again, let's explore an essay that delves into a darker side of madness, one that explores themes of madness, control, and the complexities of female identity.
You're referring to Sandra M. Gilbert and Susan Gabar's The Mad Woman in the Attic. The woman writer and the 19th century literary imagination. They explore the trope of the mad woman in literature, particularly in the works of 19th century women writers.
They argue that the mad woman figure, it's often this representation of women's stifled voices and repressed desires in a patriarchal society.
Precisely. And they examine how women writers use this trope to explore the societal constraints placed upon women and the psychological toll of those constraints.
And they analyze works like Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, where the character of Bertha Mason, Rochester's first wife, is confined to the attic and labeled as mad.
And Gilbert and Gubar argue that that Bertha, she represents the repressed anger and frustration of women, trapped in these stifling domestic roles.
And they discuss other works like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, where the monster can be seen as a symbol of the destructive consequences of male ambition and control.
Yeah, their essay it's a powerful exploration of how the label of madness has been used to silence and control women, throughout history. It highlights the ways in which women writers use literature to challenge these patriarchal norms and to give voice to their own experiences.
It makes you wonder how many women were labeled as mad simply because they dared to challenge the status quo or to express their creativity and individuality in ways that were deemed unacceptable by society.
It's a sobering thought and one that reminds us of the power of language and storytelling to both reinforce and subvert societal norms.
Okay, let's dive into another essay that tackles a different aspect of madness. This one explores how societal anxieties and fears about technology and progress have shaped the portrayal of mad scientists in literature and film.
You're talking about David Scoll's The Mad Scientist, a cultural history of the technophobic archetype. He argues that the figure of the mad scientist, it reflects our anxieties about the potential consequences of scientific advancements.
It's like those stories serve as cautionary tales about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the potential for technology to be used for both good and evil.
Exactly. And he traces the evolution of this archetype from early Gothic novels like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein to classic films like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and even contemporary science fiction films.
One thing that stood out to me was his point about how the mad scientist is often depicted as isolated and alienated from society.
Right. They're driven by their own singular vision and often, operate outside the bounds of ethical or moral constraints.
It's almost like they embody the fear that science will become dehumanized, divorced from ethical considerations.
And Scal argues that this fear it reflects a deeper anxiety about the rapid pace of technological change and its potential impact on our humanity.
It makes you wonder if in some ways the mad scientist archetype is a reflection of our own ambivalence towards progress. We're fascinated by the possibilities of scientific advancement, but also wary of its potential consequences.
And that ambivalence, that tension between fascination and fear is what makes the mad scientist figure so enduringly compelling.
Okay, for our final deep dive in this part,
Yeah.
let's explore an essay that takes a more psychological approach to analyzing the mad geniuses trope.
You're referring to K.R. Jameson's Touched with Fire, Manic Depressive Illness, and the Artistic Temperament, where she examines the link between mood disorders, particularly manic depressive illness, and artistic creativity.
Yeah, and Jameson, she draws on this wealth of biographical data and research to explore the lives and works of renowned artists, writers, and musicians who struggled with mood disorders.
And she presents a nuanced perspective, acknowledging the potential for both heightened creativity and profound suffering that often accompanies these conditions.
What I found particularly compelling was her discussion of how the cyclical nature of manic depressive illness, with its periods of intense energy and creativity followed by periods of depression and withdrawal, can mirror the creative process itself.
Right. She explores how the heightened states of awareness and energy associated with mania can fuel creative breakthroughs, while the periods of depression can lead to introspection and a deeper understanding of the human condition.
It's like the madness becomes an integral part of the creative journey, both shaping and being shaped by the artist's work.
And Jameson argues that understanding this connection can help us appreciate the complexities of artistic genius and to destigmatize mental illness.
It's a reminder that creativity can flourish in unexpected places, and that madness, when channeled effectively, can be a powerful force for artistic expression.
Now, before we move on to our final part, I want to ask you what's been the most surprising insight you've gained from this deep dive into madness in literature?
That's a great question. I think what struck me most is how multifaceted madness really is. It's not a simple label or diagnosis. It's a complex interplay of individual psychology and societal pressures and artistic expression. It can be both, a source of creativity and a form of rebellion, a reflection of trauma and a tool for social commentary. It's made me realize that there's no single definition of normal, and that those who are labeled as mad, they often possess unique insights into the human condition.
I couldn't agree more. It seems that madness in all its forms is an integral part of the human experience.
It feels like we've really journeyed through like the depths of the human psyche in this deep dive into Dionysus and literature. And we've explored the lives of writers and delved into the minds of mad characters and analyzed text through the lens of psychology. What a ride.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? And throughout our exploration, one thing has become like abundantly clear: madness. It's far more nuanced and multifaceted than we often give it credit for.
Oh, absolutely. It's not some simple label that we can just like slap onto someone or some character. It's this complex interplay of individual experiences and societal pressures and expressions of creativity, trauma, even rebellion.
And it seems that every essay we've discussed, it offers like a different perspective on this complexity. Some essays, like Rothenberg's, Are Creative Writers Mad? It delves into that age-old debate about the link between creativity and mental illness, presenting a spectrum of viewpoints without offering those easy answers.
Yeah. Others, like Sem's analysis of Stephen King's Misery, they explore how specific mental illnesses like manic depression can manifest in characters and themes,
Yeah.
Revealing a dark side to artistic inspiration.
Yeah. And then there are essays that use psychological theories, like Horney's concept of basic anxiety, to illuminate the motivations and behaviors of characters in American literature.
It's like each essay provides a different lens, through which to view this concept of madness. And when we combine those lenses, we get a much richer, more nuanced understanding of the human experience.
We've seen how madness can be a source of both creative brilliance and profound suffering. A tool for social commentary and a reflection of evolving cultural attitudes towards mental health.
Thinking back to Lupac's essay on the institution in contemporary American fiction, it's chilling how the label of madness can be used to control and silence those who don't conform. It makes you question who gets to like define normal, and what happens to those who fall outside that definition.
Right. It's a reminder that madness isn't just a personal struggle. It's also a social phenomenon shaped by power dynamics and cultural norms.
And even in cases where an author might not be, explicitly addressing social issues, their exploration of madness can still offer like profound insights into the human condition. They take Fiddick's analysis of Dostoevsky's notes from Underground, for example.
Right. The underground man with all his psychological complexities, he becomes this embodiment of the anxieties and frustrations that simmer beneath the surface of societal expectations. His madness becomes a form of rebellion against the constraints of a world he perceives as oppressive.
And speaking of rebellion, I keep thinking back to Vonnegut's, shamanistic characters. Their madness, their willingness to see the world differently, it allows them to critique the hypocrisies of society and offer like alternative ways of being.
It's as if their madness gives them a unique perspective, a heightened awareness of the absurdity and beauty of the human experience.
We've also seen how madness can be a reflection of trauma, particularly in Golden's essay on war films. The way those films portray the psychological toll of war, from war neurosis to PTSD, it reveals how our understanding of mental health has evolved alongside our cultural experiences.
Those films force us to confront the invisible wounds of war and to acknowledge the complex, often long-lasting impacts of trauma on the human psyche.
This deep dive, it's really expanded my my understanding of madness. It's made me realize that it's not something to be, feared or dismissed. It's something to be explored and understood, and even in some cases celebrated. What about you? What's been your biggest takeaway?
I think you summed it up beautifully. Madness, in all its complexity, is an intrinsic part of the human experience. It's a reminder of the fragility and resilience of our minds, the challenges of navigating a complex and often absurd world, and the extraordinary potential for creativity and insight that exists within us all.
So, dear listener, we leave you with this final thought. What if, instead of trying to define and categorize madness, we embrace its ambiguity? What if we acknowledge its potential to both challenge and enrich our understanding of ourselves and the world around us?
Perhaps by embracing the madness within, by acknowledging the full spectrum of human experience, we can tap into a deeper well of creativity and empathy and wisdom.
And on that note, we wrap up our deep dive into Dionysus in literature, essays on literary madness, and the fascinating questions it raises about, creativity, mental illness, and the human condition. If you're intrigued by these ideas, we highly encourage you to check out both the book and the Mad Genius Thesis podcast for a more in-depth exploration. Until next time, keep diving deep.